Good morning, and welcome to the first episode of the Backlog Files as its own standalone show. I am your host, Adam, and this is a podcast that was born out of, I don't want to say necessity because that feels a little bit weird, but last year we did some experimentation. Last year we expanded our coverage of video game reviews, beware of spoilers, and we also went in to talk about older video games over on 30-minute reviews. The results were kind of mixed. People liked the reviews on beware of spoilers, but they also liked the new stuff on 30-minute reviews where we talked about old games. The issue was it wasn't finding the audience we were hoping for, and for video game reviews, that can be a little costly. We're a smaller, outlet, so as a smaller outlet, we don't always get codes, so if we're going to cover something, it comes out of pocket. And video games are expensive. The hardware is expensive, the software itself is expensive. So in an effort to do that, it's hard to, get an audience when your podcast that you're hosting on is designated as an entertainment for film and television. Because we do great with that, but video games, it was hard to get people to find. So the idea was, well, let's take the good of both of this and put it together and rebrand and start a new podcast, and we'll be using this to go forward. Now, again, because video games are expensive, we can't afford to do new video games every week. Granted, I've been playing video games for, this is going up on January 2nd, so I will be playing video games for nearly 30, or nearly, let's say, 28 years, or 27 years. I was 3 years old was when I got the Sega Genesis for the first time, and I was playing Sonic 2 and not getting past Chemical Plant Zone, but that I have a pretty deep bench of knowledge as well as catalog of games between old games that I have for old systems and old games that I have on Steam that I haven't played yet, that I buy and haven't played, and, we have a lot of that. And video games as a medium has a robust history of games that we can talk about. So in an effort to kind of keep the show going, we're going to rank and discuss franchises, entries within a franchise. We're going to start out with Pokemon, because a little background on me, this was the first real franchise that I gelled with, and, it's kind of one of those things that, like, as a kid, you kind of, like, holy shit, this is the coolest thing ever, and then, as it continued on, it continued to get better and better, and then somewhere along the way, it started to fall off. But we're not going to do just the mainline games. Oh, no, we're going to do everything Pokemon. We're going to go through and we're going to do that. And then after that, we might do another big franchise. Like, I was thinking Final Fantasy, but the reason why I didn't start with that is because I only have a few of the Final Fantasy games, and it's a costly endeavor to get into that. And the same goes for Metal Gear, which I haven't really played too much, and that was another one that I kicked around the option of doing. If there's a new game release, and I do want to talk about it, we'll do a special episode for that, where we'll do a review of a new game. So, like, I'm anticipating... I'm recording this on the day of the Game Awards, so I'm not 100% certain what they're announcing is coming early next year. I do know that we're going to be covering the Thousand Year Door remake. I do know we're going to be covering the remake of Dark Moon and Princess Peach Superstar. I don't know what Xbox exclusives are going to be coming. That are going to be coming to PC that we can cover, but we'll be doing all of that on here as they come out. And those will just be special episodes. I also we talked about it a little bit on Exploring Hyperspace Lanes, which is another podcast that I do with Josie. We were talking about her playing Kingdom Hearts for the first time, because that's something that I want to hear her talk about. And I think this is a good place, if we do that, to do that. So that's something else that we're going to explore doing a little bit, maybe monthly episodes where she plays through Kingdom Hearts, but she's got a lot going on, and I don't want to hold her to that, especially considering the time commitment that it is to play these games. So, it is what it is. But we're going to start today with Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue, which is not where I jumped in on the series. I think, if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong, I seem to recall getting Yellow first, starting with Yellow and then going back and playing Red, because I have a younger brother, and we ended up getting Red, and then, I was like, you keep the Yellow, I'll keep the Red. I got the cool Fire Lizard, you keep the little mouse. Have fun with that. And I think that this is a game that holds up surprisingly well. And that comes from beyond just my fandom within the Pokemon fan, within me, for lack of a better word. It kind of was the introduction for me, at least, and I would say for a generation, into RPG mechanics. The idea of type matchups, the idea of grinding. For me, it's like, okay, well, I'm not strong enough here. If I fight this, I'll get more powerful. I remember that happening with me, where it's like I would like, as a kid, I remember distinctly playing, and I picked Squirtle because it's like little turtle. All right, this guy looks chill. Let me go with him. And I would I tried to just barrel my way through because I didn't have any concept. Again, 3-4 years old, not really understanding the finer points of playing video games. I kind of just tried to barrel through. Didn't quite work. So I know he can beat the crap out of these guys over here, these birds and these rats. I know he can beat the crap out of them. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, so if I do that enough, eventually I'll get more powerful. And then I remember getting Bubble and being like, holy crap, I have another attack now. This is the greatest day ever. And then you go on from there, and you kind of, you figure it out. And as you go, you guess and check your way through the game, and you figure it out. And, you get to the, eventually you'll figure out how to play, and then you go from there. That's not to say the game is flawless, and I think that as we go through and as we rank these, this game will fall down, especially as we get into later titles, as we get into more mechanics being introduced and all of that. And it does, if it's one of those things where if you play one of the more recent games and then go back to this, there are a lot of things that you have to do, because even the Steel and Dark type aren't present in this game. So it is one of those things where if you play any game after this, or any game after Yellow even, you have to accommodate for the fact that you cannot just use Fire-type attacks on Magnemite and tank your way through it. Or you can't, what's a good Pokemon that got retconned to Dark-type after the fact? I can't even think of one off the top of my head, but if you can't use Fighting-type against it to get through that. And it's one of those things where it's like, oh, you have to constantly be aware of it. There is the Psychic issue where Psychic is glitched. I mean, even to this day on the re-releases on the 3DS, Psychic as a type is glitched where it isn't operating correctly. Things that it should be super effective against, it is actually weak to. Or vice versa, things that are weak to Psychic are... Alright, it was Ghost. Ghost is supposed to be super effective on Psychic, and that was the big thing in the anime, where it's like people couldn't figure out how to beat Sabrina, and then in the anime, when they got to Sabrina, that's like, no, go back to Lavender Town, get a Ghastly, and then you're good. In the game, that didn't actually work, because it was a glitch where instead of being super effective, the Ghost-type attacks, Psychic was immune to Ghost-type attacks, so it didn't actually help any. And it was one of those things where it's like, this is a game that really engaged with the multiplayer and all of that. And it is fun. To this day, it's one of those games I can go back to, and if you play the game vanilla without mods, it's still very fun to play. And it does hold up very well. And I think part of that does come from the fact that the art style is kind of timeless. I think that's one of the things that we're going to talk about as we go through this. Because I think Pokemon as a franchise has the longevity where it started with pixel art and then kind of moved into the 3D space, and as that goes, how the graphics kind of age. One of the things that I would not be surprised about as we go through this is if I think that the graphics hold up as well as they do, comparatively. Do I think that the older games age better? I think pixel art just as an art style will inherently age better. I think the sprites in this don't look fantastic, and I think that as we get into a more traditional look and feel, as we get into Gen 2, the sprites do start to look better. But there is something kind of not, I don't know about majestic, or I guess majestic, because it does inspire majesty. There's a sense of grandiosity to the Pokemon in Gen 1 that isn't in the later ones. They look more like it's Pokemon's pocket monsters. They look more monstrous here, and it does kind of add to the aesthetic a little bit. So I think that is kind of where we want to, talk about how that changes. What else is there to address with Pokemon Red and Blue? I mean, I think at this point I know the Kanto map like the back of my hand. I mean, and I think too it's the amount of exploration and a lot of the franchise mainstays that kind of get introduced here. Like I said, going back is going to be a little bit difficult because the lack of abilities, the lack of certain types, the lack of, certain Pokemon evolving, does that. And we'll get into this more down the line when we get to Let's Go, and how that kind of harkens back to that a little bit. But even like the lack of hold items and the lack of depth in the item, catalog is felt if you play this game after playing some of the later ones. But it still does hold up impressively for a game that came out in 1996. And I'm interested to see where this kind of ends off, and where this ends up in the ranking. Right now, it's going to be number 1, Pokemon Red and Blue, and we'll see if it moves from there. But let's see how it goes. Let's see how this changes. So, in the coming weeks, we do have a few more episodes. We're going to continue doing this. Next week, on the 9th, we'll be doing Pokemon Yellow. The week after that, we'll be doing Pokemon Snap. And the week after that, we'll be doing Hey You Pikachu. Followed by the Pokemon trading card game, rounding out the month of January. So until our next episode, have a great rest of your week.